Today, discover how to identify and map unique seasonal patterns in your specific market. Learn the strategic staffing and inventory framework that perfectly aligns with predictable customer flow changes, and uncover how to create promotional calendars that turn traditionally slow periods into profit centers. Hello, and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. Before we get started, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Spot On, who provide a great modern POS solution for the bar and restaurant industry, and Starfish, who use AI to turn your books into actionable steps to increase profits. So today we're talking about strategic planning, and we're going to talk about how to generate a seasonal customer flow calendar. Now, we're right at the point of the year where kids are going back to school. Business is slowing down, generally speaking. Right around back to school time for bars does not tend to be the best time of year. And so we're going to talk about how you can look for those seasonal patterns in your business, whatever they may be, and then how you can adapt your business based upon seasonality. Now, the main thing to remember here is that a lot of times we look at it and we go, oh, well, business is just up and down a lot. But there are predictable seasonal patterns that we can identify. And so depending on where you are in the country, right, maybe you're in a spot that has huge summer tourism. And so you're getting ready to wind down for the whole year as we get into fall. Or maybe you're in an area where fall leaves and the changing colors generate tourism. And so you're going to see a spike up. Or maybe you're just in the suburbs. And right now, as far as your year is concerned, with all the kids going back to school, that creates a slower period of year for you. So regardless of your seasonality, we're going to talk through how you can create a seasonal customer flow calendar that will allow you not only to predict these shifts, but prepare for them and turn what used to be chaos and slow seasons where you're just hoping and praying that things get better into predictable, actionable items that you can work with. And this system we're going to talk about, it'll work for any bar in any market. And you can implement it right now. So let's start by, how do we identify seasonal patterns? Well, the easiest way to do this is pull sales data. Now, the more sales data you have, the better. So get 2 years worth of data if you have it, pull it out of your POS system, and quite frankly, make a graph. Now, depending on your POS system, it may make the graph for you, it may not. But if you can just look at, what are my monthly sales, month to month, for 2 years, and make a little line graph that shows the ups and downs, you're going to see that seasonality because it's just going to be right in front of you. And as long as those 2 years line up, we now have a predictable pattern that we can look at. So look at the highs, look at the lows. And then once you have an idea of the months, look within the months. Because we want to not just look at holidays. We want to not just look at, is it spring, is it summer, is it fall? But we want to look to local events, weather patterns, school schedules, tourist cycles. Anything that can help us begin to explain those up and down patterns in the business. And once we know those, right, once we've looked at them and we kind of understand them, and you can be very specific here or very general here. I tend to like to be specific because I'm a finance guy, right? I love digging into data. I want to figure out, why is every peak that I see that exists multiple years, what is it? Why does it happen? How does it happen? But quite frankly, if you don't want to put that amount of time into doing this, merely understanding that every January is slow, every February gets a little bit better, and March and April are kind of our peak months, if that's your seasonality, that's important. Then you know that, and you can use that to guide your business forward. So once we've identified where those patterns are, and again, the easiest way to do that is just to make a graph and look at it, how can we plan around those ups and downs? Well, the first thing we want to do is create staffing patterns for those ups and downs in our business. And essentially how you do that is you say, okay, what is the average? So if throughout the year you see your seasonality on your graph is going up and down, and let's say it goes, we'll just pick some easy numbers here. It goes between 75 grand when you're slow and 125 grand a month when you're busy. So there's a $50,000 range. Well, when we take that average, which in this case, let's just say that's $100,000, and we're going to draw a straight line. And when it comes to staffing, we're going to say, okay, at $100,000 in sales, what should my staffing be? And go ahead and write out, not necessarily a schedule, that says, I want Amy to work and oh, I'm going to need Jim too, but more just a list of positions and how many of them you need. So in at $100,000, which is my average sales level throughout the year, I need 3 servers, 1 bartender, a bar back, and 2 cooks, or whatever that may be for your business. So now we've established kind of our baseline schedule. Now we're going to look at those ups and downs on the chart and say, okay, if I'm 25% slower, right? If I'm down to that 75% versus my 100, what does that staffing look like? Do I still need 3 servers or do I need 2? And so make your standard schedule and then implement what those lower and higher numbers look like. Now, we know when we're going into the busy season and it comes to staffing, we need to really focus on training. So you should also use this seasonality to guide your training. When it's slower, train more. When it's busier, train less. I think that's pretty obvious to everyone, but it is an important thing to keep in mind. Now, once you've figured out your staffing, we want to do the same thing for inventory and purchasing. So you should be looking at your P mix on a regular basis so that you understand what you're selling and how much. But again, what we're going to do is we're going to create that baseline number. So in our example, if your monthly sales range between 75 and 125 grand and your average is $100,000, we want to say, okay, at $100,000, what does my inventory need to look like? What am I going through based on your P mix? And this is particularly important to do with different liquors. If you think about something like chartreuse, let's say, chartreuse has been popular because of paper planes, but it's also been hard to get because the monks don't want to make any more than they're making right now. So what can you do with that? Well, you can maybe buy a little bit in the slower seasons and know about that and stock up for your busier seasons. So in hard to get inventory, we can use seasonality and kind of what people are purchasing around us to guide our purchasing. But we also know that our pars need to move up and down in relation to sales. So once we've established our baseline inventory, our baseline pars at our average sales, we can see sales going up and down and then adjust those pars appropriately across the different seasons that we have in our business. Now, the other thing that we are going to do as we do this is we're going to set realistic revenue expectations, right? I think one of the things that throws a lot of people off is that the hospitality industry, guess what? It's not stable. This is not selling software where, it's $20 a month every month from every customer. This is going to have a lot of peaks and troughs in your sales. So we can set those realistic expectations for our revenue. We can also set realistic KPIs based on that. So I think we all know when you're busier, your liquor cost is going to be a couple points lower than when you're slower, where it's going to be a little bit higher. You say, well, why is that? Well, simply put, if your draft beer yield is 90%, because when you're slower, because there's more foam, because you're using it less, but it's 93% when you're busier because you're pouring more draft beers and therefore there's less foam, right? There's less CO2 pushing against that beer. There's less carbonation in the system. I think everybody knows the first beer of the day is always foamier than the last. When you have your KPIs, sometimes we need to think, okay, is this KPI going to change based upon our volume? Right? For every bar, there's a minimum amount of labor that you need. Or that you can have, right? You need a bartender, a server, a cook in most cases at a bare minimum. So you can only drop your labor so low during the slow season. So you need to look at not only your revenue, but once we understand our reasonable revenue expectations across different seasons, then we can say, okay, how does this affect our KPIs? Because maybe a KPI that you have in a busy season needs to be adjusted for the slow season because you're setting up your team for failure by expecting them to do something that just mathematically isn't going to happen. Now, the fifth thing we can do when we establish, or the fourth, I should say, once we establish this system, this understanding of our seasonality, is we can create a promotional calendar. And so this is probably the most important piece because this is how we're going to try to counter some of these seasonal ebbs and flows, right? We're going to want to put more promotions when we're slower than when we're busier, right? If you're already at peak capacity, there's no reason to ever discount. I mean, there is, and we can get into that. But generally speaking, when you're really full, you're going to discount less than when you're really slow. So by understanding the ebbs and flows in our business, we can understand where we need to promote, where we don't, and kind of try to counter that seasonality. So you want to map out a full year of promotions that strategically address each seasonal period and your goals for that seasonal period based upon your revenue, how busy you are. And the big thing here is we want to create promotions that strategically drive traffic during our slower periods and maintain traffic during our busiest periods. Now, in general, you want to schedule your marketing 2 or 3 weeks before you want to see a change to capture that momentum, right? It takes time, especially if we're using social media, to build buzz, to build awareness. So make sure you're always giving yourself a couple weeks of marketing before you expect to see the impact. And when it comes to things like social media, we want to make sure not only are we adjusting our strategy based upon how busy we are in the seasonality in our business, but also that we're using seasonal content. Right? In the fall, focus on things that are relevant to the fall. We can also use customer loyalty programs and incentives, things like double loyalty points, to increase our regulars' visits during our slow seasons. So to wrap everything up, we've covered, essentially the 5 components that you need to keep in mind when it comes to seasonality. First of all, you're going to create a seasonal customer flow calendar by identifying your unique seasonal patterns, right? We want to understand what our business is doing. Then we can plan our staffing, our inventory, our expectations, our KPIs, and our promotions all around that seasonality in our business. Now, oftentimes when I talk to people and we get into something like this, they say, well, I just kind of make it up as I go. That's not going to work because we want to take a strategic approach to our seasonal planning that will help transform us from being reactive to proactive in our management in all ways, but largely based around our financials. We can prepare for busy times then before they arrive and optimize our costs, staffing, and promotions to blunt the impact of slower times on our business. So again, to start, all you need to do is map out your historical sales data month by month and identify the patterns you see, then think about what that will happen. So I encourage all of you to go ahead, look at those, map those out, and see what you can do to make your business more efficient and better. That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.